time for me, okay? You're watching the stream. The United Nations has declared September the 9th International Day to protect education from attack because around the world there are 75 million youngsters who live in countries that are in crisis, which means that their education is in jeopardy. What does that even look like? UNESCO put together a video where the kids are literally dropping out of school. Take a look. On the stream, we are marking International Day to protect education from attack by talking about Nigeria and northern Nigeria and the challenges for youngsters there to have a great education. I will not be doing this alone. I want to say hello to Rosie. Rosie, introduce yourself to our international audience.
Good afternoon. My name is Rosie Collier. I'm a filmmaker and I'm also a journalist. And I've recently been working on a film that's been premiered this week on Al Jazeera about an architect in northern Nigeria who's building these state-of-the-art schools for children there. And we have to remember that there's a war zone in northern Nigeria. So I'm delighted to be part of this conversation with you today, Femi, Bulama and Buki.
You're very welcome. So you will see more about that film in just a moment. But first, Buki, welcome back to the stream, friend of the stream. Remind everybody who you are.
Femi, my name is Buki Shonibale. I'm the Executive Director of Invictus Africa, where we work to close the inequality gaps affecting vulnerable and disadvantaged population through evidence-based and collaborative action. It's good to be back here.
Good to have you back. And Bulama, really great to have you here. Tell everybody who you are. What do you do?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. My name is Bulama Bukarti. I work as an analyst focusing on Sub-Saharan Africa at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change based in London. I am a senior associate, non-resident at the International Center for Strategic and International Studies, which is based in the United States, and also a columnist with Daily Trust, a Nigerian newspaper. Very happy to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Happy to have you. One more introduction to do, and that is for you, YouTube. Here you are in the comment section. We're talking about education in northern Nigeria. You can comment right here, and you too can be in the stream. Rosie, first of all, Ahmad the Architect. It gives us a really good view of what's happening in northern Nigeria and to youngsters there and to the education system there. Very briefly, tell us what the film is about, and then I'm going to play a little bit of the trailer.
Okay, so it's really about Ahmed, who is 36 years old, very young in Nigerian terms, and he set about 5 years ago to design what he calls, or are being called, mega schools in Borno State. Now, this is where the Boko Haram insurgency is being fought. Boko Haram itself, the name means we're against Western education, yet Ahmed, with finance from the state government and international donors, set about 5 years ago building 24 schools in Maiduguri and designing a further 20 around the state, even though the insurgency is still raging in the rural areas there.
Okay, that's a great setup. Let's take a look at the trailer.
Da yake ba sa son karatun boko shi yasa suka zo suka yi destroying group.
To yanzu malamin yanzu yara da suke nan.
Ko karkashin
wannan aduwa.
Wancan aduwa.
Da wancan gabaru wancan.
This area is one of the worst hit by the Boko Haram insurgency. So coming here is like we're chasing them out of their home, and that has made them aggressive.
Bookie, Education 101 it's got to be schools there. So Rosie set us up with this film, looking at this architect building schools. I don't want to give away what happens in the documentary, Rosie, but this idea of not enough schools in northern Nigeria, explain why and if school building is going to help.
So specifically in Borno, Adamawa and Yobe states in the northeast of Nigeria, they've been hit by this insurgency being fought by Boko Haram, they say, to create an Islamic State. It's been being fought for 11 years, and Femi, over 2,000 teachers, first and foremost, have been killed. Thousands more children have been kidnapped by the group. And then also you've got 1,400 schools, according to UNICEF, that have been destroyed by the insurgents since around 2011, when the then leader of Boko Haram, Abubakar Shekau, declared war on Western education. And so his fighters set about burning down many schools. And probably the most remembered moment in this insurgency and around the world was the kidnapping of these over 200 schoolgirls from their school, also in Borno State, Chibok Government Girls Secondary School. And so this is the backdrop to what has been happening in northeast Nigeria. But like you rightly said, Femi, over the course of the past 20 years or so, there's been decay across northern Nigeria. It's not just northeast Nigeria, but there's been decay in the public school system really across the north, but in many other parts of Nigeria. And this has really led to many people who have the resources to be sending their children to public schools, while the public school system is left to decay.
Bookie, again, this feels like it's Education 101. Create schools so kids can actually physically go to school. How is this project helping?
The project is a very fantastic project, especially because we know that if schools are not available, then there's nowhere for children to go to school. And that is also considering the fact that even when we think of technology as a bridge builder, a lot of those children in that community cannot use technology. But I would like to say, Femi, that when we talk about attacks on schools, attacks is not just violent extremism, even though, yes, we will contextualize on violent extremism. Natural disasters, emergencies, flood, health emergencies are also situations that arise that brings in the fact that schools can be attacked. And when we look at the Boko Haram insurgency, which is in its 11th year, you would see how that non-state actor group has deliberately and systematically attacked schools. Over 2.16 million children have been affected as a result of this. 986,000 of those children that are affected are girls. Over 700 are internally displaced. Over 43,000 education personnel are affected. But let me close my thought by saying that having this conversation with the reality of COVID-19, it brings the question in of the intersectionality of conflict as well as COVID-19. And when we situate that on how it affects girl child education, we see how a lot of girls have lacked access to education. And so there is this disinterest because of COVID-19. Many girls are projected not to be returning to school after all schools resume as a result of COVID-19. Schools are dilapidating because they are not being occupied. Use of schools for different purposes have been seen. Health consequences. And we know that a lot of girls have also been sexually abused. And so that abuse and stigmatization are also intersectional issues that we have to look at in terms of how education is really under attack.
Bulama, the way that we really understand northern Nigeria from a news perspective is looking at Boko Haram and their activities. And Rosie really covered well. It's like, well, how do we get these young people out of Boko Haram and then doing something that's very constructive. The former governor of Borno State described their ideas as being, the young men as being pregnant with ideas, which is such a great visual, but having nowhere to share those ideas. How do you see Boko Haram in the context of where we are in 2020 and then impacting kids at school or kids out of school because of COVID?
I mean, to start with, that was an incredible film, and education for me is the most potent weapon that to undermine and finally defeat Boko Haram. But unfortunately, education is a long-term investment, while politicians think in election cycles. And unless we have the right kind of investment into education, then it will be very difficult to defeat Boko Haram militarily. The military efforts should continue because they are important, especially because they would contain the violence. But addressing the root causes of Boko Haram need massive investment in education. And I think that's part of what we see in the film that you just spoke about. But wider than that, we need much more than just capital investment into education. We need investment into the manpower by employing qualified teachers that are motivated with good service conditions. We need excellent managers and administrators to administer the buildings and maintain them. And we just need continued investment into education if we were to defeat Boko Haram at all. Now, the other point is that Ahmad is pregnant with ideas, as the governor rightly said, the former governor, I should say, but he is an example of the thousands of Nigerian youth that are hungry to make change in their country, and in whose way stands people who were born before independence and who have exhausted their ideas without taking our country anywhere. So what I would say to the old politicians in Nigeria is to give way to young people like Ahmad. Governor Kashim Shettima has set an example, and I think more people should be given an opportunity, young people in all the states, and we have them across Nigeria. We have them in tens of thousands. They are hungry to make changes. They are pregnant with ideas, but there is no opportunity. They can't excel in politics because it requires a lot of capital investment, network, and scheming, and they are just too young for that. And I think this is a wake-up call for Nigerian politicians to give the younger generation an opportunity to impact on lives in their communities.
Guess we could spend a week talking about all of the issues impacting not just education in northern Nigeria, but Nigeria. I want to pivot a little bit because you're doing work which is really tackling some of those big challenges. For instance, Ahmad Buba, who is our architect, he talks about what he has in terms of his skill set that will change the level of education that is available for youngsters. Let's have a listen to him. He spoke to us a little bit earlier.
Building educational structures, particularly in the northeast region of Nigeria, is the most powerful tool for long-term resistance against Boko Haram insurgency. Boko Haram has destroyed over 1,400 schools and forced hundreds more to close. Over 3 million children urgently need access to education in the northeast region of Nigeria. Education is the only weapon that plays a significant role in their lives. It helps them to overcome their trauma. It also helps them to have hopes about the future. So the expansion of educational facilities in the region is the best response to Boko Haram's actions to stifle education.
Rosie, I have a question for you from the real Shivans Trivedi, and he says, how will this education protect the students from Boko Haram, especially girls? The girl child deals with society norm of education as taboo, emphasis on early marriage, and then being baby factories, and then some, and then some, and then some. Rosie, how do you deal with that?
Then One of the first questions that I asked Ahmed was how he had integrated security into his designs, and in fact, what you see both in the film, but also if you have the opportunity ever to go to Maiduguri, which I assure you is a beautiful city, then all of the schools are really secured by not only high fences, but actually they have double fences, many of them, and then also the city where they are, Maiduguri, as I mentioned, is the state capital of Borno, and actually it's heavily fortified. There's a heavy military presence in the city, and so I think that was really behind Ahmed's thinking when he decided that he was going to concentrate on the city, because he felt that that was better protected than the outlying areas. And it's true, there is, as I say, a very heavy military presence. But then in terms of some of the perennial problems facing children, I wouldn't just say girls in northern Nigeria, but children in Borno State and the northeast of Nigeria, issues of poverty, child marriage. Ultimately, as Albert just said, I mean, education is the best way to tackle some of these issues. You find actually that sometimes girls are married off, all too young, simply for a bride price. It's sometimes it's a commercial exchange. So ultimately, if there's more access to education, these schools, all of these schools were able to be opened and run sustainably, then you will be going a long way to educating the next generation, and therefore hopefully they can enter into employment rather than early marriages and such like.
Okay, Buki, I'm just going to tell you that we hear you, so if you could sit back in your seat, we'll be able to come back to you. So Sunny says on YouTube, Boko Haram has unleashed terror on the education sector, more especially girls' schools. The federal government is, however, trying its best to determine in ending the insurgency. Successes have been recorded. Bulama, is that a positive approach? Is that a positive comment? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, so just to bring a bit of more context, let's understand that Boko Haram's attacks on education is not accidental. Rejecting education and attacking it is at the very core of Boko Haram's ideology. The group is in itself founded on this hatred for Western-styled education, and they give different reasons in their rhetorics, but also in their attacks, it is a deliberate attack. And I make this a point because there are some places that are attacked that can be seen as tangential, that were attacked for other reasons. But education and schools are attacked because they are schools and they are education. And as the commentator said, yes, the federal government did score some successes against Boko Haram. We knew that there were about 24 local governments in the hands of the group. Their territory has shrunk, but Boko Haram remains an imminent threat. And what we have seen in the last year or so is this increasing sophistication on the part of the group. We have recorded some of their most spectacular attacks in Chad, Nigeria, and Niger in the last 10 months. And schools are not secure. And if we continue to see the incidents like the one we saw in Chibok, which was about 6 years ago, but also the one in Dapchi, where 111 girls were taken. I mean, at midday, at noon, I mean, they were taken just like that. Now, if we continue to see those kinds of attacks, we might have the buildings, we might have the infrastructure, but there will be nobody to show up in those schools. So security needs to be stepped up, and perhaps international organizations would look at, declaring schools a war-free zone in the northeastern part of Nigeria and around the Lake Chad region. I know Boko Haram is a very difficult group to handle, but there could be some room for some kind of negotiations that will lead to ceasing attacks on schools, on hospitals, and other vulnerable places. So yes, successes have been made, but there are still problems, there are still challenges out there, and we need to confront them.
Buki, I see you nodding. Let me share this with you, and then you can jump back into our conversation. Main Fighter Sisoni says, the question is, what kind of education are youngsters able to have in northern Nigeria? You have had some successes with improving the education system of young people. Share those with us. Bookie, go ahead.
Thank you. So when we talk about education, when we talk about education, a lot of times we mistakenly look at education just from the formal context of education. And when
Bookie,
we
I'm
look at the
going to interrupt you. Bookie, I'm
you
going to
know,
interrupt you and ask you
abilities
just to
of
refresh your browser.
people that
Bookie,
are
hold
lost
tight for a
in
moment.
as a result
Bookie, hold tight for a moment.
of agency.
Bookie, hold tight for a moment. So Bookie can't hear me. Bookie, hold tight for a moment. We are not hearing you clearly, and I really want to hear you clearly. Refresh your browser while I go to a thought that takes us back to this International Day to protect education from attack. Because I went to UNICEF and they had this in terms of why this day was important, why we should be thinking about it, not just in the Nigerian context, but in the global context. Let's have a listen.
The proclamation of September 9 as International Day to protect education from attacks is aimed at sending a clear message regarding the importance of safeguarding schools as places of protection, safety for students and educators, and raising awareness on the challenges faced by children living in countries affected by conflicts.
Excuse me for my acronym, my UN acronym mix-up. I should have said UNESCO. That brings us back to the film, the witness film, Ahmad the Architect, being connected to this idea of protecting education from attack. Rosie, why is a day like September the 9th, where children around the world are recognized with the difficulties that they're having to get into school, to be well educated, why is it important from your perspective?
I mean, it's especially important this year, as Bookie mentioned earlier, because of COVID. And I think that in many ways it's made everybody, almost everywhere in the world, have been subjected to lockdown, realise actually the importance of education and how important it is for their children, but also for them to be able to work. But then, of course, this is an abnormal year, 2020. So sort of rewind to 2019, there was still too many pockets in the world, whether it's Syria, Iraq, Nigeria, Mexico, where schools are coming under attack. And I have to say, one of the most interesting things I've heard so far in these past few minutes is the suggestion by Bulama that actually maybe we need to go a step further than this International Day and actually look at ways to negotiate with the armed groups to prevent them attacking schools. And I just really feel that this is the first International Day for the protection of attacks against education. But I feel that what's great about it is that it is starting an essential conversation in a year where almost everybody in school has been affected by COVID, and their education, of course, has been affected and disrupted.
Let me just go back to Bookie. Bookie, this idea of this day, you told us how many different areas that youngsters, that the education system in Nigeria is juggling with, trying to cope with. How does a UNESCO Day help with that understanding?
I think, one key thing about an international day like this is the fact that it helps us to educate the public on what the issues or the concerns are. It helps us also to understand the context or the realities of different groups of people. And when we look at this day that we're commemorating for the first time, the International Day to Protect Education from Attack, that's one day that we've never had. And a lot of people still do not understand what the issues are. And so a day like this helps us to sensitize the public, like we are doing. It also helps us to mobilize political will, of duty bearers, whether at the international level, the national level, or the subnational level. But most importantly, it helps us to celebrate celebrate and reinforce the achievement of humanity. And we can see,
Sure.
what the architect has done, what Rosie has done with this film. So with a day like
Sure.
this, it is critical for us to have the conversation, but most agree on strategies to deal with the issues that we have all identified.
Buki, thank you so much. Rosie Bulama, thank you so much. Ahmed the Architect, Rebuilding Schools in Northeast Nigeria, is part of the Witness documentary series. You can see it online at aljazeera.com and also on TV. Thank you, guests. Thank you, YouTube, for your excellent questions. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.